You thought the leaden winter would bring you down forever, but you rode upon a steamer to the violence of the sun. Tales of Brave Ulysses, Disraeli Gears, Cream Copyright Polydor Records 1967. 13. Benny awoke on a vast white plain. It stretched on forever in every direction. There were no shadows. By looking carefully, Benny could make out occasional surface irregularities. He could see no trees, no hills, no fences, no buildings, nor any other differentiating features to this strange land. He had no idea how he got there either. That alone was frightening. As he scanned the distant horizon, distinguished only by its distance than its reality as a horizon, he heard a distinctly female voice behind him calling his name. Benjamin, son of Abraham. Huh. Benjamin, I have brought you here to give you consolation. Who? I am Helga, the frost goddess. Regard me well. Benny turned and saw her. She was more beautiful than anyone he had ever seen. Her skin was like a sunset on the fresh snow. Her hair was as a moonlit winter night. Her eyes were neither blue nor gray, but the color of a swift stream under and through the ice. Her shape was tall and athletic, yet totally feminine. She was as old as he needed, yet as young as he wanted her to be. She continued, I have brought you here to give you the gift of true love. It will come to you as you have already paid the price. To find it, you first have to make love to me. But first, I must tell you the price you have paid for true love is one few men will even consider. Even your payment wasn't totally voluntary. Most men would consider the price too much, or would cry out that the price itself would make true love impossible. Take heart, Benjamin. The heartbreak and pain of the last 6 weeks are just the beginning. Your cancer is part of the price. It will go with the other part. She beckoned to an almost imperceptible depression in the whiteness around them. We will do it here. Here. Here, now, if you ever want to feel love again in your life. He lay on his back in the hollow. She knelt over him with her thighs against his hips. The snow was cold on his back. He shivered. Her thighs were hot and cold at the same time against his hips. She brushed her mound over him and drew him, still flaccid, into her. He became instantly like steel inside her. She was hot and moist around him, yet still icy. She moaned as she moved down on him and rubbed up and down, her nipples brushing against his chest. She squeezed down on him as she drew him deeper into the mysteries of her being and mashed her soft breasts against him. He brought his legs up over the tops of her calves and pulled her further. Sparks of electricity flew from his testicles to the ground as she kissed him. Her breath was like wintergreen on a winter evening. He kissed her back. His tongue explored her mouth and the back of her teeth, learning her inner mysteries. Then her tongue did the same. Their bodies moved as one as they held tighter and tighter. A bolt of lightning split the heavens as he exploded inside her. She moaned with lust and passion as she moved faster and faster on top of him. Electricity charged through his genitals. 30 years of marriage and the conception of 3 children did not prepare him for the heat of her icy passion. She screamed as the February nights in the Arctic as the orgasm went through her. The heat of her turned instantly to cold. At first like peppermint or wintergreen, then spring water, then snow. Heat, then cold tore through his soul as she shuddered and shook on top of him. Benjamin, remember the price. Remember the price. Everything whirled into a cyclone of dazzling whiteness as she became one with him for a moment. Remember the price. Whiteness blinded him. Crystals of ice rained down on him. Cold soaked through his very being. His genitals exploded in icy fire as he came again into her. Together they became a nor'easter and howled over the wintry plain. He felt her merging into him, and then she simply blew away. Remember the price hung on the jasmine-scented air as he drifted there on the trackless wintry plain. Your true love, she whispered into his ear. She waits. Benny was cold, colder than he could ever remember. He felt Helga's hot cold over his genitals as he rolled to his side. He was shivering violently. A gentle hand pulled a blanket over him as he shivered. He felt a prickling between his legs and a tube in his nose. He heard someone say, he's coming around now. He felt a cold round object against his chest. For a second, a bright light flashed into his eyes. He focused in and realized he was in a hospital. Remember the price echoed through his mind. He felt another tube in his wrist and yet another coming out of his lower abdomen. He shivered again violently, then retched and tried to heave emptiness from his gut. He couldn't move his legs. He could feel them, but they were restrained. He dug through his memory, but only found Helga, the frost goddess. She whispered to him, "Remember the price you paid." "Miranda," he called out weakly, "Miranda, where are you?" A picture too horrible for belief came up from memory. "Oh my God," he sobbed. He looked down and saw a cast from his navel to his knees with a tube poking out of it and disappearing down under the bed. The crotch of the cast was covered with a dressing. He remembered the cancer and the scheduled surgery. Wasn't it too soon for that, he thought. He remembered fainting in the morgue. He remembered Helga. He wasn't prepared for this. He hadn't told his kids anything yet. Both he and Miranda had agreed to tell them in person about the cancer after the holidays. They didn't want to spoil the holidays for the grandchildren. He hadn't even told Miranda about the surgery because he didn't want her to feel guilty for the missed opportunities for mutual pleasure that she had missed because penetration was painful for her since she started menopause. The urologist had almost guaranteed impotence because of the position of the growth on his prostate. He certainly didn't want to tell her about the subsequent conversation with the urologist and the psychologist because Miranda was prone to histrionics and hysteria and would tend to smother him with misdirected attention. He was actually relieved that he hadn't told her, and now he wouldn't have to do it at all. Most of all, he wondered about the cast. He groped around for the bed control and raised the head of the bed. The exertion drained him, and he passed out again. It would have been better if he had remained conscious. He found himself before a judge. "You have to decide what you are," said the judge. "You cannot be both, and you cannot be neither." "Your Honor, what are you talking about?" "Your papers, sir, are not in order, the way things are." "How so?" "You have to represent yourself as one or the other." "One or the other what?" "There is no space for both or none on the forms." "What forms?" "We cannot process your case without the proper paperwork." "Huh. If we can't process your paperwork, we cannot deal with you." "What paperwork?" "You must decide what you are." "I'm me, Benny." "We cannot even put you in jail until you decide." "I don't even understand what I have to decide, and what's this about jail?" "Remember the price you paid for true love," came a female voice. "You must decide, one or the other." "No, no, Nua." Benny was wide awake. He was still in recovery. "Decide what?" he muttered to himself. He tried to roll onto his side and was rudely reminded by the cast that he couldn't. There were two other people in recovery, but no staff, just patients. They were in no condition to talk to anyone. It was worse than being alone. There was a sharp pain right below his bladder. He had never felt that kind of pain there before. It got worse when he tried to move. He really wanted to talk to his doctor. He remembered filling out the pre-admission forms for cancer surgery, but why the cast? That really bothered him. He noticed 2 4 bags on the stand. He couldn't quite make out the labels, but he could bet that one was probably saline and the other was glucose. A nurse came in, noticed that he was awake, and went out again. His urologist and a very tall, very thin, black woman came back in with her. The urologist spoke first. "We almost lost you." "Oh!" "A lot of stuff didn't show up in the MRI. We had to operate right away because you had an aneurysm at the coroner's office." "An aneurysm? Don't they happen in the brain?" "No, an aneurysm can happen anywhere that there is an artery. In fact, that is what kills most cancer patients. The cancer goes through an artery and it blows. The patient usually dies of blood loss if it's a major artery. In your case, the artery that blew out was the one that supplies blood to the penis. When you passed out, the coroner looked to see where the blood went. It filled your scrotum. Your pants saved your life. The cancer had invaded everything. We had to reconstruct your pubic arch because there was even a growth there. By the way, this is Dr. Ancella. She is a specialist in vaginal reconstruction. She repairs female circumcisions. She assisted in the surgery. You will find that she does excellent work." Dr. Ancella nodded. "Our conversation a couple of months ago gave me an idea when I opened you up in the OR. There was no way we could save any of your reproductive system. All that was usable was the skin. We had to remove some pelvic floor muscle and most of the pubic arch because the tumor had invaded it. I thought about what you said about not minding being a man with a vagina, as it would be a good way to attach prosthesis. Dr. Incella was in the building, so I sent for her. I removed the cancer and did the graft on your pelvis. While I was in there, I took the liberty of widening and flattening it a little so that if you decided to become all female, your hips would look right. If you decide to go that way, I can write you a prescription for estrogen and progesterone and put you on the pill so that you can grow breasts. All you have to do is ask. This is a lot to think about. I'm sorry it had to happen that way, and I'm really sorry to hear about your wife. Was it malignant? Yes, but with an aggressive course of chemotherapy and radiation, we can beat it. When you recover from the surgery, we will start chemo. It will run for 6 weeks, during which time you will feel worse than dead, and you will lose all your hair. Afterward, we will bombard the site of the tumor with radiation for 2 months to kill any fugitive cells that we missed with the surgery and chemotherapy. There were cancer cells in all the lymph nodes we removed. As the doctors walked out of the recovery room, Benny felt more terrified than he ever had in his life. Who will take care of me? He thought. He felt truly alone. 14. Ted, I need you to come down here right away. Why? Your mother is gone, and I'm in the hospital. What happened? She got in an accident on her way home from the company Christmas party. They called me back from Atlanta to identify the body. Was anyone with her? Yeah, the son of one of the ladies from word processing. He was killed too. What are you doing in the hospital? I had an aneurysm in the coroner's office and collapsed. Are you going to be okay? Yeah, it wasn't in my head. I was lucky. Anything you need? Yeah, call the girls and tell them the news and then come down here. I'm going to be here for a while and I need you to do the legwork for me. Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to put together a funeral from a hospital bed. I'm afraid it's going to be a closed casket. She looked pretty bad. The girls aren't going to be too happy about that. There's not a whole lot they can do about it. I have a recent picture of her that I was going to send you for Christmas. We'll put it on top of the coffin. It's the best I can do. Have you done anything about the arrangements? The coroner still has her. He says that it's going to take some time to deal with the paperwork. It's something about who was at fault for the accident and stuff like that. Yeah, those official types sure can get worked up over that stuff. How soon can you be here? Depends. If I fly into Nashville, it will be late this evening. If I have to fly into Atlanta, it will probably be tomorrow morning. That is if I can even get a flight out. I hate flying during the holidays. When you get here, your mother's car is at the Legion Hall. There's a spare key inside the gas cap. Oh, she was drinking again? Probably. I'll be down as soon as I can catch a plane. Bye, Dad. Bye, son. Ben sighed and hung up the phone. If anyone could help him right now, Ted could. He just hoped that Ted wouldn't see too much. The cast was going to be hard enough to explain. If Ted knew about the cancer, he would never go back home. Ben wasn't sure that it would be a very good idea. Ted had a good job in Minneapolis, and it wouldn't do to have him throw it away. The girls would be worse. They would blame him for the mishap because he was out of town when it happened. The business travel had always upset them. They still had no clue as to where money came from, although both were on their own, more or less. He was glad for one thing, though. None of his children was in town when it happened. The sight still haunted him. He hoped that the train had hit her side of the car first and spared her a few seconds of pain. He was very glad that he hadn't seen the car. He wondered what they were doing in that part of town, as it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination on the route from the Legion Hall to home. Knowing Miranda, when she had a few drinks in her, he had a good idea about what went on, but he really didn't want to dwell on it. He lay in bed watching the yellow fluid flowing through the tube coming out of the cast and wished he could go for a walk. He also wished he had someone to talk to. His family was either dead or out of town. He really didn't have any friends, as he spent most of his waking hours working. Most of his work took him out of town. When he was home, he had spent his time with his family or sleeping. If the truth were to be known, it was mostly sleeping. He knew the skycaps at the Atlanta airport better than he knew his next door neighbor. He saw them more often. There were places in his own house where he'd never been. He finally understood why his kids were so distant. They really didn't know him. He wasn't sure if he really knew his kids. He knew their names and birthdays. He couldn't remember their ages. He was totally clueless about their likes and dislikes. He had pictures of his grandchildren, but he was at a loss to match names with pictures. He really wished he had been home more. He resolved that when he got out of the hospital, things would be different. This was too scary for him. Being alone was just too painful. When the kids go home from the funeral, he thought, they probably wouldn't ever come back again. Who could blame them? Their mother was dead and their dad was a stranger. Sure, they talked on the telephone. Sure, they called him dad. They even sent him cards on Father's Day. He couldn't remember one time that they brought problems to him. Miranda handled everything. She didn't go back to work until all the kids were out of high school. She helped with homework. She went to open house. She went to PDA. She dealt with teachers. She paced the floor when the kids were out late. Now the kids had kids of their own. Miranda was gone, and as usual, he was out of town when it happened. The sight on the morgue slab was undoubtedly a just punishment for an absentee spouse. Worse yet, barring a total screw up with paperwork, he couldn't even attend the funeral. Fast as